Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea and Japan get ready to meet face-to-face at the WTO over Japan's trade restrictions on Korea. They'll be looking for a resolution in a high-level meeting at Seoul's request. South Korea's finance minister announces a strategy to respond to those trade curbs by helping companies get the parts and materials they've been cut off from. The government will also encourage big and small companies to work together. And President Trump is still sounding optimistic about a deal of some kind with China. They've wrapped up their first day of talks in Washington, but the markets are still skeptical. It's 4:00 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. It appears President Moon Jae-in will not be attending the enthronement ceremony of Japanese Emperor Naruhito later this month. An official at South Korea's presidential office said that while this has not been confirmed, the chances of Moon attending are extremely slim. This could mean Prime Minister Lee Nak-yeon will attend on his behalf. If the PM does go, it could help improve ties between South Korea and Japan, which have deteriorated badly because of Tokyo's trade restrictions on Seoul. The Japanese media have reported that if the South Korean PM is there, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe would be willing to meet with him briefly. The winners of 2 Nobel Prizes in literature have been announced, those for 2018 and 2019. Last year, the prize was not awarded because of a harassment scandal. Of the 2 winners, one is from Poland and the other from Austria. Lee Jeong-eun tells us more.
With the Nobel Prize in Literature being canceled in 2018 due to a sex scandal, the 2018 and 2019 prizes were awarded at the same time on Thursday.
The Nobel Prize in Literature for 2018 is awarded to the Polish author Olga Tokarczuk for a narrative imagination that with encyclopedic passion represents the crossing of boundaries as a form of life. The Nobel Prize in Literature for 2019 is awarded to the Austrian author Peter Handke for an influential work that with linguistic ingenuity has explored the periphery and the specificity of human experience.
The 2018 award given to Tokarczuk is just the 15th literature prize given to a female laureate in more than a century. And of the 11 Nobel winners so far this week, all other winners this year have been men. The 57-year-old is considered the leading Polish novelist of her generation and is known for her works that blend the real with the mystical. The Nobel Committee was especially impressed with her epic historical novel, The Books of Jacob, which the committee said presents a rich panorama of a little-known chapter in European history. Last year, she also won the Man Booker International Prize. The 2019 winner, Peter Handke, is credited as one of the most thought-provoking writers in the German language and is known for being one of the most influential writers of contemporary fiction. However, his outspoken nature has been deemed offensive by many, as he once denied the Serbian massacre and compares Serbia's fate to that of the Jews during the Holocaust. But despite his controversial comments, Nobel judges all agreed to name him this year's winner. Both will receive over $900,000 in cash, a gold medal, and a diploma that will be presented at a ceremony in Stockholm on December 10th. Lee Jeong-eun, Arirang News.
For the first time in almost 4 decades, Iranian women have attended a World Cup qualifier in Tehran. Our Kim Da-mi tells us more.
Cheering in joy and blowing horns, flag-draped Iranian women headed to their first soccer match in 38 years. The 2022 World Cup qualifier between Iran and Cambodia in Tehran on Thursday welcomed 3,500 Iranian women. Only 3,500 tickets in the 80,000-seat stadium were provided for women, and these sold out in less than 1 hour. The women were seated behind a 2-meter-high metal fence and had to enter the stadium 4 hours early to keep them separate from the male supporters. But despite this, many were happy just to be there.
This is an amazing feeling. For me, at least 20 to 23 years of longing and regret lies behind this.
Iran has banned female fans from stadiums since 1981 under the country's strict Islamic laws and customs. FIFA had demanded Iran allow women to stadiums after a fan set herself on fire and died while protesting against her arrest for attending a game.
They're so excited they're going to the stadium. God willing, there will be freedom sooner so that they can attend all matches, not just the national team matches. That will be much better.
FIFA said it will be working with the Iranian Football Federation to develop plans for women to attend domestic matches in the Iranian League. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
The South Korean men's national football team celebrated a win Thursday evening in their second World Cup qualifier, beating Sri Lanka 8-0. They played in Hwasong, just south of Seoul, where South Korea's towering striker Kim Shin-wook found the back of the net 4 times. Tottenham Hotspur star Son Heung-min scored a brace to get South Korea off to a perfect start in Group H. The 8-0 victory is the biggest win for the squad since Paulo Bento took over as head coach in August last year. Meanwhile, Vietnam, coached by South Korea's Park Hang-seo, beat Malaysia 1-0 on Thursday, earning their first win in Group G. In Major League Baseball, despite a league-best 106 wins in the regular season, the Los Angeles Dodgers failed to make it to the division rounds of the postseason. Now that the season's over, South Korean pitcher Ryu Hyun-jin is on the open market. Lee Min-sun reports.
LA Dodgers season is over after they suffered a shocking postseason defeat to the Washington Nationals. Despite a league-best 106 wins in the regular season, the Dodgers were eliminated in the National League Division Series, and this year's season came to an end for both the team and South Korean pitcher Ryu Hyun-jin. Ryu is now headed to the open market. Ryu said in an interview that this year will remain as his most memorable season, and he will consider signing with a team that have a good record and recognize his value. His agent Scott Boras, who also worked with Ryu when he first entered the U.S. Major League in 2012, is confident of Ryu's value in the free agent market. Boras said in an interview that he is aiming at a high-salary multi-year contract. Major League's official website ranked Ryu third among the starting pitchers who are on the open market for 2020. 2019 was the best season of Ryu's career. He achieved the league's best ERA of 2.32 and his career high with 14 wins. Ryu was the starting pitcher for the Dodgers opening day and the All-Star game. He also received the NL Pitcher of the Month award in May. Lee Min-sun, Arirang News.
South Korean golf sensation Lee Jeong-eun has won this year's top rookie prize on the women's tour. The LPGA announced the win on Thursday. Lee is ranked 4th in the world. She officially plays as E number 6 because she's the 6th player in LPGA history with her name. She earned 1,273 points in the rookie standings, giving her more than a 750-point lead over the next best contender, Kristen Gilman of the U.S. Lee is the 13th player from South Korea to win the honor and the 5th Korean in a row. South Korea and Japan are due for a showdown this Friday at the World Trade Organization in Geneva. They'll be looking to resolve their trade conflict, with Seoul having filed a complaint over Japan's trade curbs. Kan Hyung-woo has more.
Trade officials from Seoul and Tokyo are meeting at the World Trade Organization in Geneva on Friday local time to discuss Japan's export restrictions on South Korea. Bilateral talks at the WTO are usually carried out at the working level, but given the importance of the matter, Seoul requested higher-level talks. As a result, South Korean Trade Ministry's Director General for Trade Legal Affairs, Jung Hae-gan, is set to sit down with his Japanese counterpart, Junichiro Kuroda.
We're going to clearly point out how Japan's actions violate WTO agreements and what we think is the problem. Based on that, we're trying to find an agreeable solution that can satisfy both sides.
The official added that he plans to seek an early resolution with his Japanese counterpart. If, however, the talks do not go well, Seoul is expected to send a formal request to set up a dispute settlement body at the WTO to make a ruling on the matter. In July, Tokyo imposed export restrictions on South Korea on 3 high-tech materials, which are crucial for the production of semiconductors and displays. The South Korean government has been stressing that Japan's export curbs violate WTO rules and the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. Kan Young-woo, Arirang News.
It's been exactly 100 days since Japan imposed those export controls on South Korea. Our Ji-young looks at how South Korean chip and display companies have fared since then, with their supplies under pressure.
In a bid to reduce their dependence on Japanese supplies, Korean chip and display makers have turned to domestically produced materials and are trying to diversify their suppliers worldwide. South Korea's switch to local suppliers had long been anticipated amid Japan's export curbs on three key materials used for the production of chips and displays, namely photoresist, hydrogen fluoride, and fluorinated polyamide. According to an industry official, Korea's major semiconductor and display firms, including Samsung Electronics and SK hynix, are in the process of applying local substitutes of hydrogen fluoride in their product lines.
After conducting multiple tests, we've started using locally produced hydrogen fluoride in our factories to replace Japanese supplies.
Hydrogen fluoride is a critically important material in the chip and display industries. And according to the head of the Semiconductor and Display Technology Association in Korea, over 80% of hydrogen fluoride used in the country had been imported from Japan.
After the curb, many domestic semiconductor and display firms have been striving to diversify their hydrogen fluoride suppliers, including those from the local market, China and Taiwan.
The expert added that semiconductors take longer to be produced than displays, meaning that the display industry is paving the way for the major change in suppliers.
For the past 6 years, domestic companies like Seoulbrain and RAM Technology have been developing technologies to produce high-purity hydrogen fluoride. Domestic semiconductor and display makers were able to apply these companies' products almost right away as they readily had the technologies.
The expert predicted that in case of hydrogen fluoride, complete localization would be possible by early next year. Ji-young, Arirang News.
And the South Korean government has announced it's going to invest more than $1.6 billion a year to strengthen the competitiveness of local companies making the key materials, parts, and equipment cut off by Japan's trade curbs. Our Hong-yu has the details.
Marking 100 days since Tokyo slapped export curbs on South Korea, Seoul's Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi announced on Friday at the first competency committee meeting for key industrial materials, parts, and equipment that the government will draw up a priority list of supplies for investment and prepare a customized strategy to cope with the export curbs. In order to push ahead systematically with the strategy, the government has three main plans. First, $1.6 billion a year will go into strengthening the competitiveness of firms producing key industrial materials, parts, and equipment. The government will promote the revision of a special law that serves as a legal basis for the measures by the end of 2019. Also, it will find cooperative models between companies and provide customized aid for firms that implement such solutions. $227 million from the extra budget has been approved for this. Lastly is securing the supply chain of goods on the priority list. Hong said pan-governmental efforts to deal with Japan's export curbs have been effective in diversifying import partners and boosting private investment. But the core of strengthening competitiveness of firms, according to Hong, lies in creating win-win cooperation between big companies and SMEs. Before the start of this meeting, Hong asked companies some of the difficulties they're facing, and the companies asked for the 52-hour workweek regulations to be eased for research and development. To that, the minister said complementary measures for the 52-hour workweek will be announced within this month, as some SMEs are having difficulties following the system. Hong-yu, Arirang News.
It's time now for an in-depth look at the market news on this Friday, and for that, I'm joined on the line by Dr. Kim Se-wan, professor of economics at Ewha Women's University. Dr. Kim, thank you for coming on today.
Good afternoon.
Well, today it's been 100 days since Japan imposed its trade restrictions on Korea. This was ultimately economic retaliation for political issues. 100 days on, how are the two countries' economies doing?
Well, quite unexpectedly, the administration's export restriction on Korea is not much affecting Korean manufacturing so far. And the mutual delistings from the white list do not much affect each country either yet. There were quite a few times of Abe administration's permission on shipping the key materials to Korea. So given that circumstances, I think the administration has a big concern on related Japanese corporations' business situations. So I believe that this quiet and lukewarm situation lasts for a long time.
That's interesting because we understand that Korean companies are going to start running out of key materials they need from next month. What are those items and what can they do about that?
It looks that the three key materials on memory chip production have almost depleted stockpiles. At the beginning of Abe administration's export restrictions, it was said that the key three materials like hydrogen, fluoride, etching gas, and photoregistry altogether, maximum inventory stock period would be like 3 months. And it has been more than 3 months after the beginning of the restrictions in Korea. So given that situation, both of Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix production is pretty much stabilized, I think, due to timely purchases of materials from other sources like Taiwan, Europe, and domestic providers. So I have to say that even though the uncertainty between the two countries dominates the economic relation between the countries, the Korean manufacturers are doing pretty well over that Japan's restriction.
Well, that's good news for them. Samsung Electronics, which you mentioned, posted preliminary earnings better than expected for the third quarter, more than 7 trillion won, a little less than $6 billion. For Samsung's smartphone business, earnings were up 30% from the quarter before. What stands out to you in these numbers?
Samsung Electronics' 7.7 trillion won operating profit in quarter three exceeded market expectation almost by 10%. I think Samsung Electronics' major business are faring well against the headwinds, particularly the high sales of Galaxy 10 and Galaxy Note 10, and the higher popularity of Galaxy Folds are contributing to restoring Samsung's business. But if you take a look at the Samsung's profit against the last year's profit, that decreased by 50% still. So we have to take a good look at the fourth quarter's Samsung Electronics business and profits, whether they are really recovering from the depths of the slowing business.
Got it. Well, in the meantime, the U.S. and China are in trade talks this week in Washington. A report from Bloomberg says the U.S. is considering a currency deal with China. How would this fit into the bigger picture? And if there is a deal, big or small, what does it look like?
There is a possibility that China and U.S. can reach small deals, like by postponing tariffs on Chinese export to U.S. and China imports more agricultural products like soybeans and pork from United States. And if U.S. and China go through currency deal on today's meeting, it means that the Beijing and Washington together will appreciate yuan up to a certain level, which is enough to decrease China's trade surplus against the United States. And this is what exactly U.S. government did in 1985 over Japan's huge trade surplus against the United States. But since the Beijing and Washington are not ready for reaching the agreements as of now, we have to take a look at the last part of the negotiation between the two governments.
All right, Dr. Kim, we should know more this time tomorrow. We're going to have to leave it there for today, though. We appreciate your insights.
Thank you very much.
Now, President Trump was still sounding optimistic about a deal after his administration's first day of talks with China. Even Beijing seemed hopeful, but the markets are still a little skeptical. Lee Jeong-eun reports.
The stocks on Wall Street went up overnight. This in response to rising hopes for the ongoing U.S. China trade talks, which kicked off in Washington on Thursday local time. Chinese Vice Premier Liu He is leading the Beijing delegation, and U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer are on the American side for the two-day meeting. This is the first such meeting in 3 months, with the previous round in Shanghai ending with no deal. As of now, no details have been revealed, but President Trump hinted at a positive outcome.
I think it's going really well, I will say. I think it's going really well. So we had a very, very good negotiation with China. We're going to see them tomorrow right here, and it's going very well.
On the same day, he also tweeted that it was a big day of negotiations with China and added that he will meet China's Liu He on Friday at the White House. Given these optimistic comments by Trump, there is rising possibility of a small deal. Bloomberg and foreign reports say the two sides may agree on a partial agreement. It could include a currency agreement and additional agricultural purchases by China in exchange for a delay of tariff hikes by the U.S. Washington had previously announced it would impose a 30% tariff on Chinese goods starting next week. China had also echoed the optimistic sentiment of the U.S. Liu He said that China has come with great sincerity and is willing to make progress with Washington on trade balance, market access, and investor protection. Meanwhile, the industry's general consensus is slightly more pessimistic, with many saying a big deal seems very unlikely. However, with the two sides proactively engaging in talks, the world is paying close attention to the outcome on Friday. Lee Jeong-eun, Arirang News.
Railway workers here in Korea have started a 72-hour strike demanding better pay and working conditions. The country's railway operator, Korail, says it's doing all it can to minimize passengers' inconvenience. Kim Jae-hee has the details.
The Korean Railway Workers Union began a 72-hour strike at 9 a.m. local time on Friday. Given that the industrial action will continue until Monday morning, Korail has enforced emergency transportation backup plans to reduce disruptions for commuters and to ensure safety. In preparation for the strike, Korail says it has been operating a 24-hour emergency transportation headquarters since Monday. During peak commute hours, Korail will deploy substitute workers and military personnel to ensure trains in the capital area run as smoothly as possible. It aims to ensure train operations in Seoul remain over 80% of usual levels to minimize inconvenience. The walkout is expected to cut manpower to around 60% of normal levels, even with the injection of substitute workers. During the strike, the operation rate of subways in Seoul during off-peak hours is projected to be about 88% of usual levels. High-speed intercity KTX services are expected to be running at some 72%. The slower Saemaul and Mugunghwa passenger train services will run around 62% and 67% of normal levels, respectively. Korail is updating information about train operations during the strike period on its official website and smartphone app. Passengers will not be able to book tickets on trains that have been canceled as a result of the strike, and messages are being sent to customers who have already made reservations on those trains. Affected customers will get a full refund on the price of their train ticket. The union and Korail have held 12 rounds of talks since May, but couldn't narrow their differences. The union is demanding higher pay for Korail workers, the hiring of more workers, and for safety-related staff to be more thoroughly trained. The union says it will launch another strike in November if their demands are not met. This is the first time in 3 years the Korean Railway Workers Union has launched a strike. There was transport chaos in South Korea in late 2016 when they walked off the job for 74 days. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
South Korean boy band BTS are opening a pop-up megastore in Gangnam-gu district here in Seoul. According to Big Hit Entertainment, the pop-up store will open for around 80 days starting next Friday. It'll be 4 floors filled with BTS products against backgrounds from the group's music videos. The store will mostly be decorated in pink, the signature color of their song Boy With Love from their latest album. Meanwhile, BTS were preparing for a concert on Thursday local time at the King Fahd International Stadium in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. BTS were to be the first South Korean boy group to perform a stadium-sized concert in the kingdom. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.